Afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's Raleigh City Council work session. We have two items on the agenda today. The first, we're going to be hearing about current and future initiatives at Research Triangle Park. We have Scott Levitan here today, CEO and President, Linda Hall, the CFO and Executive Vice President, and Ray Trapp, who is Vice President of Strategic Engagement. I am going to turn this over to you all to tell us what's happening, what exciting things are happening at RTP.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for having us, Madam Mayor, members of council, city staff. As always, it's a pleasure to be here and to talk about all the great things that we have going on in RTP. I am Ray Trapp, Vice President of Strategic Engagement, and of course, I'm thrilled to have with me our CEO and President, Scott Levitan, and Linda Hall, our Executive VP and CFO. So with that, I'll get right into our presentation. I know time is limited, but would be remiss if I didn't speak to my friends and all council members, but definitely Councilmember Fort, want to say hello. And always great to see you. And of course, to my Aggie brother, Councilmember Branch, and good friend, Aggie Pride, brother. So we'll start with updates. I like to start this presentation. We can roll to the next slide. I like to give a base of RTP and the foundation and our mission. Whether you're a lifelong resident of the Triangle or if you're new to the area, I feel this gives us a base to go from where we've gone from 6 decades to where we are now. At its numbers, RTP is 7,000 acres, 55,000 plus employees, and 300 plus corporations. If you look at this slide, you see the industries that are prevalent in RTP, from biotech to life sciences, ag tech, clean tech, data science, cybersecurity, and also fintech. So these are the corporations that make up the majority of the companies within RTP. I always like to point out our foundation's mission. That mission gives you the blueprint for where you want to go to the future, because you have to stay on that mission in order to get to where you're going. So when we look at it, that's facilitating collaboration between the Triangle universities. And on this map that you have to your right here, you see Duke, you see NCCU, you see UNC Chapel Hill, and also, of course, NC State listed. But when we talk about Triangle universities, we also want to extend that to St. Augustine's University, to Shaw University, to Meredith, to Peace, to all of the universities that encompass the Triangle. And of course, we can't live out our community colleges, which of course include Durham Tech on the Durham side and also Wake Tech on the Wake side. Wake Tech doing amazing things to furnish life sciences students and also continuing on the top industries that make the Research Triangle what it is. So we can't leave out those important universities. We've been intentional about our focus on working with those universities that traditionally haven't been at the table, and we'll continue to do that as we move on our mission. Next up, to promote collaboration and cooperation between the universities, and here you have that. I showed this slide, and this isn't a slide to brag, but this is a slide to show the incredible growth in the Research Triangle Foundation in 2020 to 2021 alone. This slide and these numbers would be amazing in any time, but to be able to show this slide during a global pandemic shows that companies want to be in the Research Triangle part. Companies want to be close to Raleigh. They want to take advantage of the students at NC State, the students at Shaw, the students at St. L. They want to take advantage of the quality of life in this region. That's why they're choosing to locate here. So when you see that number, that is $4.7 billion in investment and almost 8,000 jobs. I'll repeat that to let that sink in, because those two numbers are outstanding. $4.7 billion in investment and close to 8,000 jobs. So you see a lot of the companies listed there. Of course, the one that everyone's been talking about since the announcement of Apple, which is amazing. But we also talk about the expansions of the corporations that are already here. Fidelity continuing to announce job after job after job to now 2,500 jobs, an expansion in addition in the last year of long. Biogen continuing to have announcements. Fujifilm Diosynth, again, continuing that expansion. So we have to pay attention to this and understand that folks want to be in Raleigh. They want to be in Durham. They want to be in RTP. Next slide. Boxyard RTP, I love this slide, and I love to talk about this because as we talk about where we've been as a foundation and where we've been as RTP, this speaks to that. Everyone that I've known that's worked in RTP from the 80s to the 90s, my future mother-in-law always talks about it when she worked at LabCorp in the 90s. The one complaint that anyone has had about being in RTP, there was nowhere to eat in RTP. If they wanted to eat, they wanted to shop, they had to leave RTP's campus in order to do that. We love the companies and the restaurants around Miami, and we love that our folks have went there, but now we provide them this amenity right in the heart of RTP. So that's 15 unique local restaurants and retailers, 40 upcycled shipping containers, and as our CEO likes to say, an investment that's only can be made and only can be loved by a foundation, which is a $9 million investment from our foundation in this amenity. The ROI for this is the point of destination that it becomes for this region. We want folks from Raleigh to take that drive to RTP and come and hang out in Boxyard. Have another point of destination, adding again to that quality of life and that culture that we love in the region. Making this about local entrepreneurs expanding their brand. Next slide. When I talk about local entrepreneurs expanding their brand, this is what it looks like. These are the folks that make up the vendors in Boxyard. From Meat and Graze to BU Cafe, Bull Kogi, Buzzy Bakes, Carburitos, and they're all listed here. Lawrence's Barbecue, great. All of these are local folks. And I love when I show this slide because this is what our region looks like. The diversity that is shown and showcased in this and these entrepreneurs, which are providing a service to RTP, is what we latch on. It's what makes this region different from others. So-called competitors and regions that we so-called compete with, they can't point to a slide like this. They can't tout out the diversity that we have and that we're investing in here in this region. So these are the folks that make up Boxyard. Boxyard is fully open, so please come out. We want to have you all out. Come out, have lunch with us, have breakfast with us, whatever we have it. Have an adult beverage, Full Steam has those. The Lagoon Bar has those, so we have everything that you need. Next slide, please. Forever groundbreaking. We always want to be moving forward as a region and definitely as RTP. So when we think about what's next and where we're going, that future is Hub RTP. Next slide. Hub RTP, if Boxyard is what we call the entertainment district and the food district of RTP, this is downtown RTP. This is mixed use development at its finest. 1 million square feet of office space and lab sciences space, 125,000 square feet of retail space, 250 hotel rooms, along with multifamily, and also that commitment to the environment and that commitment to sustainability with over 16 acres of green space. So we want for this to be a next point of destination. For all the folks that worked at RTP in the 80s and 90s and had to find places to go find somewhere to eat, we solved that problem. And for all the folks that have an issue with finding places to live, we hope this solves that problem. Not we hope, but we know this will solve that problem as well. This is the next evolution of RTP. Next slide, please. When we look at our partners, and these are our hub partners in development, KDC, Longfellow, MAA, White Point Partners, and also our funding partners. $70 million of this coming directly from the foundation to show how much we believe in this project, how much we believe in this region and making this region second to none. Durham County, $20 million. And also our companies in RTP. As most of you all know, RTP is a service district. So the companies that live in RTP, and companies do live in RTP, pay a tax to be here. These companies tax themselves an additional $10 million to make Hub RTP happen because they believe in it. They believe in the vision and they believe in where we're going as a foundation and where we're going as RTP. And $1.4 billion in development from private developers to overall create this downtown RTP. Next slide. When we talk about regional initiatives, this is something that we want to be there and part of the conversation for. This is part of the conversation, Mayor, that I know that you're out there in front of, but mobility and transit. making sure that we stay up with this and making sure that we look 2 decades down the road, not being caught up on what's today, but finding solutions for tomorrow. We don't hope to own the solutions, but we want to support and be a part of that. All of the solutions that come to the table and make transportation easy. STEM workforce pipeline development. We want to make sure that students from Shaw and students from St. Aug that previously looked at STEM jobs in RTP and didn't think that those jobs were them, that they have a pathway to those jobs. So our STEM RTP program, which used to bring underserved children and youth out to the park and expose them to STEM careers, we had to shift and we had to be flexible, as everyone has during COVID. So what we did was we couldn't bring underserved youth to the park to expose them to careers. So we turned that into a grant making operation. So we sent out an RFP, and that RFP was for nonprofits that did this work and did exposure to STEM careers on a 24/7 basis. So they could leverage the funds that we previously would spend on that one day to continue this work throughout the year. That is a huge one. Inclusive workforce housing. We all know and we all see the housing prices continuing to rise throughout the region. So we have to make sure that we're ahead of the game, and all of the pluses that we have right now for economic development, which are housing affordability, quality of life, and all of those things, that we stay ahead of those and that we don't become just like everyone else. Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Collective, this is one of the things that I am ultimately proud of and that we've moved the needle on so far. We've made a commitment starting at the top with our president and CEO to Linda Hall, our CFO, to work towards an inclusive collective that starts right here. And that starts no more than looking at the numbers from our MWBE participation. On that hub project, which I showed, which was a $2 billion project, we're at 32.57% minority participation. So we're not just going to talk about it, we're also going to be about it, and we're going to walk the walk. So when we talk through all of these regional initiatives, we want to be a part of the answer and we want to be a part of the solution. That's what we were started for 6 decades ago, to figure out how research can be a product and research can be that ultimate product, and how R&D can move this region forward. We want to continue that. And we also want to continue that in an intentional and inclusive way. So I know we were limited on time and I had 10 minutes, so I wanted to pack it all in as much as possible. So I give you 10 minutes of RTP and the Research Triangle Foundation. We're open for any questions.
That was great, Ray. Thank you so much. And thanks, Scott and Linda, for being here with us. Who has questions relating to RTP and what's happening? Councilmember Branch.
Thank you, Ray, and definitely Aggie Pride, as Aggies do. Great presentation. My questions around your MWBE, your 32.57%. What's the breakdown of that between minority-owned and women-owned businesses? Is my first question. And my second question is around companies that come into the area, and as they grow, how do we ensure that they are helping build that talent and they can reach the community instead of importing the talent?
Absolutely. So I'll give an overview, and Linda Hall is here, and she's the best person with numbers that I've ever met when it comes to numbers, and she has those numbers right off. But I think we're somewhere around 20% as far as women-owned, and then the rest are with minority-owned businesses. So there's definitely always work to be done, but I'll put those numbers in that 32.57% up against anyone, any day. On the second part of the question, what we have to do is make sure that talent pipeline is there. And a lot of the companies coming in aren't looking to bring employees with them. They're looking to access local talent. I'll say fall or summer, early summer, fall of last year, Scott Levitan and I had dinner with a life sciences company that was coming in. And they said their dream was to recruit out of the community college system. So from that, we connected them to the local community college system in both Wake and Durham. And from that, there you go. So I think that's what we have to do. We have to make sure that when corporations come in, that we're ready to go and ready to make those connections and get those connections to the folks on the ground that are already doing this work.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Fort.
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Trapp. And I do see Sarah Chick down at the bottom too, so I want to acknowledge her while she's here as well. I guess mine is more of a statement and maybe not so much a question, but Mayor Baldwin and I have had this conversation with a number of folks. One of the things that we want to be able to do is figure out a way to improve our transit system. And this kind of feeds into your question as well, Councilmember Branch. I think there are a lot of people in this area within the region that would make great employees, but one of the challenges is, getting folks from Southeast Raleigh, getting folks from some of our smaller municipalities in Wake County out to the RTP to be able to take advantage of those opportunities if transit and transportation is a hurdle or a barrier. So one of the things that I think, we will be asking our staff to do is help us figure out some ways to work with the county and the other municipalities to develop a very strong regional transit system, because I think we've got a lot of young folks, a lot of folks in various stages of their career that could really make an impact and be productive employees for a lot of the companies in RTP. But we've got to figure out a way to make sure they can get to RTP and back home and not sit on the bus for 2 or 3 hours doing that every day. So that would be my comment.
Absolutely. Agree with you 100%, Councilmember Fort. And we actually, Sarah Chick and I, and Sarah keeps me in line. She keeps me straight. She always keeps me on the ball. But we actually went out and we visited with the Southeast Raleigh Promise and saw that location out there and trying to figure out ways that we can better connect them with the jobs and the corporations in the park. So it's on our radar as well.
Any other questions? Councilmember Knight?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I'd like to follow up on Councilor Fort's statement or comment. And again, I too appreciate the work that you all are doing, Mr. Trapp and Mr. Leviathan.
Okay.
And we appreciate the partnership also. And I want to touch on, as Councilor Fort did, really the idea of regionalism. And we know there was a editorial, I guess, in the News Observer the other day about that. And I think y'all are right at the sort of the fulcrum, if you will, of regionalism with Raleigh, Wake County, and our sister counties, Durham and Orange in particular. So I hope we can continue to build on this partnership around transportation, around housing as well, certainly, and also around economic development. And so look forward to doing that. And hopefully y'all are sort of the experts of this to continue to think about it and lead in that idea. It may not be a legislatively mandated concept or idea, but it's one that we could do, and maybe even more on a more formal basis than we're doing now, but certainly in an intentional way. So I appreciate that future conversation and continuing partnership. But I'd also like to get a tour out there. I haven't been out there and certainly since COVID, but I know y'all are doing a lot of great work out there. So I'd love to get out there. If we did something with all of us or whoever wanted to go at some point, I'd love to be part of that. Thank you.
We'd be happy to do that lunch at Box Yard.
That'd be great. Thanks so much.
Start from there.
Thanks so much.
Start from there.
Well, one of the things that I've talked to the city manager about, and we all talked about when we first took office, was having work sessions that went off site, would go to different locations, take the bus, go out there. This could lend itself to one of these, again, we're in the throes of COVID. But at some point in the future, I think being more engaged and seeing instead of just talking about something would be really helpful. I just want to make one comment that I think is really interesting. I remember when I was on the Go Triangle board, we actually pulled together a group of people and did a visioning session for RTP, what RTP could look like. And I remember putting 20-story buildings. We were doing them with Legos. And somebody said to me, you can't do that out there. And then the other thing is I put housing there. They were like, you can't do that either. I am so happy to see you're now building density, that you're thinking about residential, because making RTP more friendly and having that mixed use experience, walkability, bikeability, I think is critical to the future of RTP. and we're heading in that right direction. So I want to say thank you all for that. And I have the opportunity to meet with Ray like once a month when we do our Chamber of Commerce call, and I'll kind of share what's going on. So I just want to say adding Ray to the organization has really brought a new perspective, and he does keep us energized and entertained on these calls. So thank you, Ray, for everything that you're doing to make RTP the best it can be. And thank you for your leadership, Scott and Linda. So let's keep this train going, and let's get the train going.
Well, Madam Mayor, thank you. And you can see why we let Ray do the presentation.
Well,
I echo your sentiments.
well, thank you so much for being with us today. We really, oh, one other thing. You mentioned STEM. I don't know if anybody has ever talked to you about our Digital Connectors program. So, you know, one of the things I love about Digital Connectors is they will go to places like Red Hat and Citrix. And one young man, I mean, literally, I accompanied them on one of the visits. His jaw was dropping, and they were all looking at each other going, "You mean we could work here?" They had never been in a place like that. They didn't know what the possibilities were. And one thing I always love to say is people can't be what they can't see. So this could be an opportunity for us to partner on something with the digital connectors and your STEM program. So I'm throwing that out there, and I see Marshall taking notes, but I think that that could be an incredible partnership just in terms of getting students out there to see, again, what those possibilities are in the world. So thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Madam Manager, I see you taking notes, so I'll follow up.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much to all of you for being here with us today, and we'll be in touch. And don't be surprised if we're out there for one of our work sessions.
Thank you for having us.
All right. Take care. Okay, that was fun. It'll be fun to go out there too, and it'll be a totally different experience than what many of you have had before. All right, next, the American Rescue Plan Act. This is the Fiscal Recovery Funds update. Mary Vig is presenting today.
Good afternoon, mayors and members of council. Happy New Year. I don't know much longer I can say that, but I haven't seen you since the new year. I do want to take a moment before I begin and introduce you to our newest team member. So we're excited. We finally hired our ARPA grant manager who will be assisting with this process as we move forward. So I want to take a moment to introduce Leonie Letsom. She has come to us with a lot of years of experience. Not a lot, that kind of dated. But previously she worked in Nevada and has been in North Carolina for 3 years and worked for the state most recently. And so we are excited to have her on board. So I wanted to put a face with the name as we move forward. So I don't know, Leonie, if you want to just say hi to City Council.
Hello, it's a pleasure to meet everyone. As Mary stated, I relocated here from the state of Nevada. I'm living in the city of Las Vegas, and I never look back. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to be of service. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you for being here.
All right, so today I will provide an update on where we are on several of our processes that have been ongoing. We will also provide the recommendations from the Community Health Initiative grant proposals that we received. And then we'll talk about next steps, especially in the areas of community engagement and council committee work that staff has got underway. So as we pull up the presentation. So just as a reminder, I always begin here that Raleigh was allocated $73.2 million in direct Treasury allocation. I don't know how many times we've already talked about it in terms of bringing it to council for updates, but we have been working through a phased approach, knowing that this is a long-term endeavor. I do want to give you some good news that we did receive final guidance on January 6th. So staff right now is working through that, attending webinars and making sure that we're doing all the things we need to do to be in accordance with the federal government. So as I mentioned, it is a phase approach. We're somewhere between phase 2 and phase 3, still working on prioritizing projects and capital needs and operational needs, getting community feedback, working with city council. And so, you know, just as a reminder as we move through here. The last time we provided an update, we talked about our project categories and really beginning to look at the next phase of ARPA funding in these areas. And so as we've moved forward, we've designed this presentation, our community feedback in these buckets, as we like to call them, in terms of those economic recovery, community health, housing and homelessness, transit, and infrastructure. So this slide talks about our prior funding allocations, and you can see everything from nonprofit agency support. That includes both the HRC process and the current process we have underway for capacity building for some of our smaller grant nonprofit agencies, our downtown economic development and activation, housing and homelessness, economic recovery, and then the $10 million for our community health that we'll talk about today. Remaining funding is $43.1 million, and so that's the next phase of what we'll be discussing. So the $1 million that was brought to the table after the HRC process was designed to assist our nonprofits who currently are not eligible to receive city funding in our traditional sense, whether it's due to lack of audits or capacity or the reporting guidelines. And so council appropriated $1 million in ARPA funding. So right now we're currently, we have an RFP out and we're soliciting proposals from organizations that provide technical assistance in capacity building, and that can help us develop a plan for our local nonprofits, kind of like an educational over a few months. Upon completion of the program, nonprofits will be eligible and awarded grant funding. And so we're excited about this opportunity, and I've been working on this RFP and thinking about how do we design this in a way that not only does it allow them to be eligible for this funding, but ongoing the city funding that we have available through our various grant processes. So the next initiative I'd like to talk about today is our community health initiative. We appropriated this during phase 2. It was $10 million. It was really a partnership to expand health initiatives around areas of mental health, food security, and those assistance for those who have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. We posted the RFP in October. We had 16 proposals that we received in November. In December, we evaluated those and scored them. And then today, we're bringing those recommendations here to City Council for you to see. So as I mentioned, we did receive 16 proposals. It represents over $36 million in funding that was requested. We did form a cross-departmental evaluation committee that included representatives from the city manager's office, finance, budget, housing and neighborhoods, and our equity and inclusion office, or department now. Some of the evaluation criteria that we used and looked at was the project impact in terms of how it's going to impact our community and the populations that it serves, the link to COVID-19, the equity impact, the collaboration and partnerships, especially as it relates to, you know, have they worked to receive funding from other organizations or grant processes, the fiscal responsibility and history of the organization, and the overall organizational capacity to actually complete the program, the project in the time. Because as a reminder, we are on a time limit with our ARPA funding, and so we want to make sure that whatever we're funding is going to be able to be completed over the next few years in order for them to receive the funding. And so that was part of the criteria that we looked at. In the agenda packet is a more detailed handout of the projects that have been awarded. It talks about the amount that was requested, the amount that was awarded, and a description of the project itself. I would encourage you to take a look at that. I didn't include it on the slides because it was a lot to look at, but just want to highlight a couple things. Not all projects were funded at 100%. Some were funded at partial amounts, and you'll see that on there. There are some agencies that we did not recommend funding at all. Those that received partial funding, that was very specific to an area of the project that they requested. And so in some cases, when they requested funding, it included operating, for example. And our goal here, if you remember, was to really support capital, large-scale capital projects. And so we would remove the operating amount and just fund the capital portion of their request. So where did the recommendations for funding are in these buckets? So some of the funding is in the area of affordable housing and revitalization projects. And you'll see on there, there's funding for DHIC and Passage Homes. Majority of the funding, though, is going to our vulnerable population. And so those are especially in the areas of mental health, overall health, human trafficking, child abuse, youth services, substance abuse treatment, and many other areas. And so you can see the list of organizations on that list that we do recommend in funding. So I want to provide a brief update on outreach. So as you recall, we did begin utilizing a digital engagement simulation to gather feedback called Balancing Act, and it is still live and active on our website. It's where residents can actually go in and allocate dollars to the various buckets that we have established. We received over 600 entries or submissions to date. I also want to let you know that the ARPA website continues to be updated, and we just recently did a pretty big update to it coming out of the holidays. But I wanted to highlight the chart on this slide, which talks about some of the initial results coming out of our Balancing Act tool. And so when we think about those 5 buckets and they can put their dollars in there based on the funding available, you'll see that infrastructure, 38% of those that responded allocated their dollars towards infrastructure. And you can see from there it goes community health at 19, housing and homelessness at 18, economic recovery at 15, and transit at 10. And so we are continuing to leave this up, and we would recommend that. We will continue to update it with the new dollar amount that's available as we move forward and those types of things. But it is a great tool to continue just to solicit feedback. And as we go into our next phase of community engagement, I think we'll see more activity as we do more outreach to get more people in utilizing the tool. So working with the Office of Community Engagement, we initially were working on some large-scale meetings at the end of this month at the Convention Center. But given where we are with COVID and the current spike, we are recommending doing those in-person meetings in the spring and summer, understanding that we've got, we're still working through this process and we've got years to spend this money and work through this. But we are trying to get some of that initial feedback beyond what we've already gotten through the meetings that we've already had and those community conversations and the meetings with some of the business community and our nonprofits. So we would like to conduct virtual learning and listening sessions beginning the end of January, beginning of February. We're going to have specific sections that are focused on our residents and our community because we'd still like to have these areas. We'll conduct some virtual sessions for our service providers to gain their feedback and for the business community, some sessions for them as well. And like I mentioned, we would look to conduct those in-person meetings in spring and summer. And so part of what we're going to do over the next couple of weeks is solidify those dates, first of all, in the next week, and then get them out with communication so we can begin to educate the public about what this is about and get them to attend these meetings so we can get their feedback, and also so we can spend a minute so they understand what ARPA funds are, what they can and can't be used for, and then get their feedback to help us shape, how do we frame these buckets and provide information for you, City Council, as you begin to make these decisions. So last time I presented, we talked about bringing items to council committee. So there's another handout attached to the agenda that provides a framework for this that I wanted to present today to you. I welcome feedback or if there's things missing from this list. I mean, as you recall, we generated well over 200, I think we're now close to almost 300 ideas, both from city council, city staff. I keep getting ideas from the community. And so really beginning to think about what are some of those initial areas in this phase that we can look at. And so one of the areas we looked at was our strategic plan and worked with Stephanie Olson to begin to understand what already has initiative teams surrounding it and that we could really was in line with council's priorities and with the communities. So that attachment not only shows you what we're proposing and working on right now, but you'll see that the items that are in green are items that have already been completed or funded already, but we just put them in where they would probably, we would guess, go in council committee. I do recognize that there are 2 committees that so far doesn't look like we've allocated resources, but as we move forward, there's lots of opportunity here to engage those committees. And so just want to highlight them real briefly in terms of ED&I. It's really beginning to look at the digital divide. I know there's a group that's continuing to work on the public realm study. We've had lots of conversations with our hotel and hospitality community. In fact, the hotel community has submitted to me a proposal in terms of what they would talk about in terms of a grant idea in using ARPA funding. And so staff, we have a team that would love to look and work on that and then bring that to City Council for possible consideration. And then looking at our business alliance support, understanding we've worked with DRA downtown, but there's other alliances throughout the community that we would look at. Do we provide support for potentially, or are there grant programs that we could do? Looking at our growth in natural resources, GNR 1.1 is focused on our tree canopy study. And there's a great opportunity. I know they're working and having conversations with the county. And so there's an opportunity here to move this project along. And then GNR 4.2 was actually a really large initiative in this strategic plan focused around renewable energy and our climate action plan. And then the last one is looking at stormwater mitigation, specifically in disproportionately impacted communities. Because if you remember, as part of this, when we think about infrastructure, we can fund stormwater programs, but I think it's part of it is really beginning to think about, are there areas of our community that need that mitigation that are disproportionately impacted by COVID or at that poverty level. In terms of safe, vibrant, and healthy community, looking at our Acorns program, this has come up frequently. I know, we funded one group in terms of a pilot this year, but is there additional support? And what does that pilot follow-up look like? And how can we help that advance even further in our community? The mobile farmers market or food market, really focusing on food scarcity. I know our Parks, Rec, and Cultural Resources has done some great work in this area. So working with them and our other staff in this area. And then really looking at our housing and rehab program, in terms of does it have sufficient funding to help homeowners who are struggling. In terms of, I also know there was a backlog at one point, and can we help clear it out and really help, affordable housing in that area, and also look at some of our homeless programs. In terms of transportation and transit, sidewalk connections, specifically in looking at pedestrian and bicycle improvements, especially in those areas of like transit lines or, again, some of our disproportionately impacted areas of our community where they need those last bit of sidewalks completed, or it's a high traffic area that may not have qualified for our petition sidewalks. Looking at our new burn broadband conduit, especially as we think about the BRT coming through. And then that last bullet, which is our bus rapid transit. So is there a way that ARPA funding can help move that forward or help in the infrastructure surrounding that, much like the broadband conduit? So what are the next steps? So we'll continue that implementation of the nonprofit capacity building and grant process, and I'm sure over the next couple of months as we work with ARPA and continue to bring council updates, we'll update you on that process. We would like, unless council has any questions or concerns today, begin contract negotiations with those who were awarded our community health partners, so we can begin to really work with them to get this capital funding in our community. We will set the dates and conduct our public virtual meetings, and we'll ensure that council, you are aware of those dates, and you are more than welcome to attend. We would welcome that, and if you are, let me know. We'd love for you to say a few words. And then city teams that are not necessarily formed already, but most are, will begin working on those items for council consideration. And then we will work with city council and with council staff to schedule time on your committee schedules in the future over the next few months to begin to bring these items back to those committees for discussion and consideration. So we are available, and I have staff here if you have any questions for us or feedback.
So I would like for you, Mary, to go back to the page with the awards, like the community groups that would get awards. Could you talk, for people who are watching this online, could you talk briefly about some of the projects that you're recommending for funding?
Sure. Let me go back. So I'll start actually with under vulnerable populations, Wake Med, because they're one that we are recommending fully funding. They requested $1.8 million, and we would recommend that fully funding amount. And that is, they're bringing to the table, again, their property and a building that already exists, but it's to renovate, upgrade, and outfit a recently acquired property and its landscaping in a trauma-informed design. So they've done some work in this area to understand, how to treat members of the community, especially in the areas of mental health. And they call it Community Health Innovation and Equity Operations. And it's going to help evolve and advance local collaborative population health efforts to better manage the health of our most vulnerable residents. I'm reading from their application, while working to make a broader community impact that addresses social factors resulting in health inequities and disparities. And so really looking at our most vulnerable populations. And if I'm remembering right, this is right off of New Bern. It's part of that campus. And so it's in that area. So that's just one example. In terms of the Haven House, it's another example of a group that we are recommending full funding at $1.2 million. It is funding to renovate their recently purchased 14,000 square foot building in Raleigh. The renovations will use trauma-informed design to double their intake space, increase their meeting space, and provide permanent pantry and climate-controlled boxing and exercise facilities. And so really helping them move their efforts forward. I don't know how many of these, Mayor, you want me to go through. I mean, I could keep going.
Yeah, no, I just wanted people to hear some of the examples of, both of these projects you mentioned are amazing projects. So I just wanted people to hear that this is really a worthwhile endeavor that is going to have a tremendous impact in our community, tremendous positive impact in our community moving forward. So I just want to say thank you for your work on this. And I think I saw Councilmember Knight with his hand raised, and Councilmember Cox has his hand raised. So Councilmember Knight.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. VQ, back to that slide that you were just talking to with the mayor. Is that on a different funding schedule or timing? You said you recommended those. I'm assuming you're saying you're going to recommend those to the council, and at some future date we will be voting on those, or you're recommending those for the public to further discuss?
I mean, I'm not sure it requires a formal vote of council because you've already appropriated the $10 million previously. Okay. Unless there's a major issue and you look at me today and say, no, bring it back for a formal vote. But this, I guess when we say recommendation, this is what came out of committee, and we bring forth today, understanding the work that we've done. And so, we can bring it back to the next council meeting, but we really want to begin to work on those contracts and begin to get this funding out into the community.
Councilmember Cox was next.
Well, I'm not, Madam Mayor, I'm not finished. I had a second follow-up. Sorry. More generally, just to be clear with everyone, the schedule of the rest, the 5 buckets we're talking about, the process. I know there's a tension between the process and getting these dollars to these folks and out on the ground. And I'm sort of wanting to push this out because I know I'm not gonna say they're desperate organizations and entities out there, but the sooner we get these dollars out the door, the better. But talk to us a little bit more about the timing and scheduling of funding the 5 buckets.
So you're talking about not the 10 million, but the next steps. I mean, so
That's
some
right.
of those items will move quicker than others. Some of them may be smaller projects like the tree canopy study. There's lots of work over the last few years that's already been done in that area. Some of them, for example, the climate action plan implementation, there may be chunks of that we break out. I would anticipate over the next couple months bringing things to council committee. I mean, if there are specific areas that council has concerns or seeks ARPA funding on, much like you've done in the past, you can bring them to the table. But we're working over the next few months on those items that I mentioned in terms of where staff is directing our efforts next in those areas.
Yeah, you might also want to explain or just remind everybody the receipt of this funding. When we receive funding, you can't give out the money until you get it, and it's all phased. So you might want to remind everybody what the phasing looks like.
So technically, we have 4 years. I'm looking at my staff. 4 years to spend the funding, or to have it encumbered, and then there's an additional year to actually have it spent out and reported. We have only received 1 tranche of funding last year, and so remember, it's done in 2 batches. So we will not receive the next half of that funding until the spring. So part of this is I don't want to say it's, I mean, we can move as slow or quick as council wants to, but some of that is we can't spend what we don't have, which we won't have till the spring, but we can plan for it. But it is designed, or it can be designed to last as long as 4 years if we wanted to. I mean, I don't think we will, but we're working through that phase 2 and 3 right now, which is bringing stuff back for council consideration.
Any additional questions, Councilmember Knight?
Well, I lean towards the faster, as quickly, as appropriately as we can move through this process so we can get these dollars out the door, the better. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Cox.
Yes, I'd like to get more details about how these dollars will actually be used to address homelessness. I understand you want to give money to various organizations, but that doesn't really inform us about how the money will be spent in order to address homelessness. And I mean, you talked a little bit about it, but I haven't seen a report about that. And I'd like to get a report on more specifics about how homelessness will be addressed, which is a huge problem right now in the city. And also to David Knight's comments, when that will be addressed.
So are you talking about the funding we've already allocated, or the funding that we haven't allocated yet, but staff is working through ideas and suggestions to bring back to council? So we'll bring those back to committee for those conversations about specific programs around homelessness and housing. If you recall, we have spent funding associated with housing and homelessness to the tune of, the first one was the 10 million, which went to support the purchase of the hotel. And so, I mean, we can get your report on that, but I just know that was part of that $10 million bucket. Several of the initiatives that are receiving pieces of this $10 million health initiative are associated with housing initiatives or homelessness. If you need more detail than what's in the proposed project, let me know, and we can provide that. But like,
Yes,
for
I'd like
example,
to get more specifics if we could.
Could you do that in the city manager's report?
yes,
Just
ma'am.
provide us some more details. Like, I mean, I know Wake Med is focused on treating homeless members of our community. Haven House, that's what they do. They work with foster youth coming out of the system oftentimes, and provide housing and care and support services for them. So I'm familiar with those two, but you might want to just elaborate on that in the manager's report if you could. Councilmember Cox, are you done?
I'm particularly interested in not just in care of homeless people, but how we're going to use the money to house homeless people. So if that could be addressed as well, that would be great.
Okay.
So that's a future, I'm sorry, Mayor, I just want clarification, but that's something we'll have to bring back in the future as part of the council committees, I'm assuming, not what we've already funded.
Yeah, and
provide
I'd like to
information
get
on what we've
like with
funded, but-
Councilmember Knight, I'd like to get a timeline on that because, you know, when will the money be available and when can we act on that? Hopefully not 4 years from now.
Certainly. If I may add, we have this item under special items on next Tuesday's city council meeting agenda that you will have some further backup to elaborate on the recommendations to align with the presentation that Mary had presented today. So that'll be further clarity, as also we can also just recap what we've done from the beginning of the pandemic in the way of homelessness through our emergency assistance, whether it was ARPA or not ARPA. Because you may remember initially out of the gates, a lot of the funding that came through housing and neighborhoods was not necessarily ARPA funding. It was some of our traditional federal dollars to help with homelessness. So we've got a very good story to tell, and we should be able to bring that as backup next Tuesday.
Thank you. But that's not for vote, that's just for information. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Melton?
Thanks. I'm simultaneously trying to quiet my dogs. I just had a quick, I think, procedural question, maybe for the city attorney, if she, I know we already voted to allocate the $10 million to the community health groups. I noticed that one of the 16 that has been selected for funding is the Tammy Lynn Center. I serve on their board of directors. So I know I'm not allowed to vote on any funding for them, but we're not technically voting for these 16 groups. So I wanted to raise that issue and just make sure that I don't need to do anything else to avoid getting in trouble.
No, unless you're voting on, you do not have to do that. I do think it's good that you put that on the record and made it clear that you did not vote on it. This is a staff decision, and that anytime you would vote on it, then we'll go through the proper procedures.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions for Mary?
No questions, just that I am on the board for Passage Homes as a city council representative. But again, we're not voting, so there's no issue.
Okay. All right. I don't have any additional questions, but I do want to thank staff for their work on this. This is going to yield some amazing results, and I just want to say thank you. This was really well thought out, well done. The process you went through was very thorough and thoughtful, and I just want to say thank you for moving this forward in a timely way. We always get ribbed a lot and say, you know, everything in government takes so long. This is really moving things forward in a timely fashion. Thank you for all you've done.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other questions or comments? Okay. Well, I want to say thank you again to everybody. This process with ARPA funding has been a little difficult because of guidance that was needed from the federal government. I think you saw Mary said we just got final guidance on January 6th. So we will be working through this and having, I'm sure, many more discussions. So thank you everyone again. I am now going to adjourn this meeting, but also we're going to have a lot to do this year, folks. So hold on and get ready. It's going to be good. So goodbye, everyone. Thank you. Have a good night.